Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Carrie Burke, your moderator for today's webinar, Managing Penetration Testing Programs and Vulnerability Time to Live with ThreadFix. You may send in questions at any time during the presentation via the chat feature. We will collect these and address them at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce Dan Cornell, a globally recognized application security expert who holds over 15 years of experience architecting, developing, and securing web-based software systems. As Chief Technology Officer and Principal at Denim Group, he leads the technology team to help Fortune 500 companies and government organizations integrate security throughout the development process. Presenting alongside Dan, we have Kyle Pippin. Kyle has over 15 years of experience in successfully building and delivering enterprise-level software products and projects. As product manager of ThreadFix, Kyle is involved in all aspects of product planning, development, and presentation. He is responsible for ensuring ThreadFix meets or exceeds customer needs and expectations by working directly with clients, project management, and technical leads to facilitate the greatest possible value to customers.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank all of you for taking some time to spend with us today to talk about some of the things we've put in the most recent release of ThreadFix. We'll be providing a little bit of a background of the ThreadFix platform, as well as, again, talking about some of the newest capabilities and benefits that we've included in the most recent 2.8 release that will soon be making its way into the 3 branch. Again, just really appreciate everybody spending some time here. Looks like Kyle just had his lunch delivered. What are you having for lunch today, Kyle?
Chick-fil-A. My wife picked up Chick-fil-A on the way back from getting the kids' weekly school stuff.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds delicious. I'll be webinaring from the outdoors today, which is something I've wanted to try for a while. Maybe next time we'll smoke a brisket while we do our webinars. But again, really appreciate everybody taking the time today. As Carrie said, please ask questions through the Q&A capability, and we'll get started. Everybody here probably has at least some background with Denim Group, but just to provide some background, at Denim Group, we're building a world where technology is trusted. Our focus is on helping organizations build secure and resilient software. And we do that with a combination of our services, our testing and advisory services, threat modeling services, and also, as we'll be talking about today, our ThreadFix vulnerability resolution platform that Kyle heads up. Just to provide an overview for ThreadFix for people that might not already have a background on it. With ThreadFix, we're creating a centralized place that you can run your application and vulnerability management program through. Right, we want to bring all this data into one location to help you make sense of it, and then to drive the most important issues through to remediation. And in doing so, giving you data and analytics about your program that you can use to drive better maturity. And we do this in a number of ways. We first create a consolidated view of your applications and your vulnerabilities, right? So you're looking at your portfolio of assets, application assets, network and infrastructure assets that support those applications, as well as pulling in data feeds from all the different testing and assessment activities. Then we want to help you prioritize which are the most critical vulnerabilities that you need to address first. From there, we want to help you translate vulnerabilities to the developers and the tools they're already using to speed remediation. And again, by doing this, provide powerful analytics. And we want to really help you drive efficiency with automation and remediation. And if you think about the ThreadFix, there are 2 primary users of ThreadFix typically. There's security analysts that are running the mechanics of the program, and then security management that want to understand how the program is going. And for security analysts, what we want to do is to make them as efficient as possible. We want to take all of the data munging and data communication tasks off their plate so that they can focus on higher value activities, right? They can focus on the things that only humans can do. And from the security management side, we want to provide them with the data that they need in order to understand more about their program and drive better maturity. So with ThreadFix, we typically have a left to right data flow. So on the left side of the equation, we have all the various sources of data that you have about vulnerabilities in your program. So static testing with check marks or a Fortify or a Veracode, dynamic testing with an app scan or a web inspect, integrated application security testing with like a contrast, as well as your software composition analysis with your black ducks, your sonatypes, your dependency checks. Also pulling in the results of the network and infrastructure scanning tools like the Qualys, the Nessus, the Nexpose, and also, and we'll be talking about some enhancements we've made to this capability. The things you're doing with your manual assessments, the penetration tests, as well as third-party testing, and doing this false positive triage. On the right side of the equation, we've got some other consumers. You want to look at the reporting and analytics, right? How do we take all this data, how do we get value from all this data being in one centralized place? As I said, communicating these issues and translating them from being vulnerabilities that security teams care about into being trouble tickets, right, or software change requests that development or operations teams care about, and also communicating these over to other stakeholders such as GRC or operations people. And so you see again this pipeline where we take all this data on the left side, clean that data up to provide you with this one centralized normalized view, do your false positive culling and your risk triage, and then get value from that data on the other end, both in the resolution of the issues as well as tracking data about the program. And there's a number of stakeholders, not necessarily users of ThreadFix, but stakeholders in the overall effort. The first is the security team, most specifically the app security team, but also the network testing team. And we want to help them run more efficient programs. ThreadFix, through a variety of the automation mechanisms and orchestration capabilities that it has, we want to increase your testing throughput significantly. Also, that normalization and deduplication process reduces your overall finding count, right? We're going to find issues that are, from different tools or different testing methods, and we're going to identify, well, this is actually additional data that we have, but it's only about one root cause vulnerability. So we want to shrink the pool of data that you have to go through, and while providing better context about that data through that normalization and deduplication process. For the development teams, usually there aren't a lot of developers working in ThreadFix instances. Sometimes if you have like a security champions program, those folks might have access to ThreadFix. But the primary way that most ThreadFix implementations interact with development teams is through the tools they're already using. We want to allow you to communicate with the developers in the Jira system, right, or the HP ALM system that they're already using for their workflow management. We don't want to be sending Excel spreadsheets or PDF documents over to developers. Developers don't speak PDF, they don't speak Excel, and it's a waste of time for security teams to put all this stuff in Excel spreadsheets. Instead, if you can communicate with development teams in the tools they're already using, that takes friction out of the remediation process. They don't have to, it just goes into their normal workflow. You don't have to train them on ThreadFix as a new tool or platform to use, right? The security work that you want them to do, the vulnerabilities that you want them to fix, just show up in their systems alongside all of the other work that they need to do. And we've found a lot of value in doing that, as we'll talk about, up to a 44% reduction in the mean time to fix or the mean time to remediate. Finally, ThreadFix communicates to risk management teams. And again, they're typically not necessarily going to have a direct login to ThreadFix, but we can pump data out of ThreadFix through ThreadFix's APIs to put that data in the formats that they're going to want to see, so that they can see that at a level of granularity that they need in order to do their risk management function. Most GRC teams that we interact with, they don't need to know which URL and which parameter for all the cross-site scripting vulnerabilities that they have, that might exist in your application portfolio, but they do need to understand the character of the vulnerabilities that are out there. And so these are the groups that most typically interact with ThreadFix, either directly or indirectly. Again, as we talked about, we want to create a consolidated view. So having one central application portfolio with the application and all of its metadata, pulling in the data feeds from all these different assessment activities. And in doing that, we want to give you a reduced finding count and better context. We've got a couple patents on some of the techniques that we use to do this. We want to allow you to prioritize based on data, to slice and dice this vulnerability data to prioritize which are the critical vulnerabilities that you want to fix. It's just a fact of life in the app security space and in the vulnerability management space. You're not going to be able to fix everything, right? There's simply not the, you don't have the resources, you don't have the time. It's just not realistic. And so in security, you have to make trade-offs to determine where do we want to focus our efforts? Where are we going to get the most risk reduction by focusing our efforts? And again, with ThreadFix, the centralized view allows you to slice and dice the data and make a determination which of these vulnerabilities are the ones that we need to focus on fixing first, and which are the ones that we're going to have to live with. Talk again about how important it is to translate these vulnerabilities that security cares about into software defects that the developers care about. It sounds like a little bit of wordplay, a little kind of semantic, goofing around, but it's, honestly, in ThreadFix or out, that's the most important characteristics that we've found that differentiates between the application security efforts that make progress and the ones that really struggle. And these integrations are bidirectional. So in addition to sending these defects out to the developers, we can monitor their progress and identify where are the teams that are taking action and being successful, where are the ones that are not taking action, and where are the ones, in the worst case, where they're trying to take action, but they're not being successful in fixing vulnerabilities, because those are the teams where you need to spend your analyst time mentoring and training to put them in a position to be more self-sufficient. By doing all of this in one central location, you get a lot of really valuable data about your program, and you can use this data to drive maturity. You don't have to look to see, well, what did we do in our static analysis program last week? What did we do with our dynamic scanning program last week? What did we see from our third-party pen test teams last week? All that data is in one place, and you can start to run experiments and take action on the results. If you're curious about running training for your developers, run it for a team, look and see if their security outcomes change, and then you can make a determination. Do I want to extend that training program to the rest of our developers, or do I think that budget can be spent in different ways? And it really puts you in a position to have much more grown-up conversations about your security program, to move beyond fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and allow you to have data-driven discussions about risk management with other stakeholders in your organization. And underlying this, again, is we want to make your security analyst as efficient as possible. And so we want to take advantage of existing automation that's in place, and we want to open up new avenues for automation. We want to focus your security analyst on doing the tasks that only humans can do. Because again, I say this a lot, I've never met a security team that felt like they were overstaffed. I never met one that felt like they were underworked, right? That's just the nature of the industry. There's so much development of systems and applications going on, and the security teams are outnumbered. You have to, as we talked about earlier, pick your battles, but automation is a powerful tool to say, what tasks can I take off my plate so that I can focus on more critical tasks that only humans can do? And ThreadFix has a number of capabilities in that area. So with that, we'll just take a quick pause. That's a background on the ThreadFix platform and a couple themes that we will come back to. Now, I wanted to talk through a couple of different capabilities that we have in the in the system in the recent release, the 2.8 release for the 2.8 line, and that shortly, in just a week or so here, will be available in the 3.0 line. And those include some integration updates, as well as updates to the data filtering, how you can slice and dice to prioritize vulnerabilities. And the key capabilities we're going to talk about is managing vulnerability time to remediate and a notification system around that so you can prioritize and keep those vulnerabilities moving, as well as managing penetration testing programs, right? How do we, every organization that is, has a complicated enough program in order to benefit really tremendously from ThreadFix, they're also running penetration testing programs, and so we've baked a lot of new capabilities into the platform to support those efforts. Let's see, Kyle, you want to talk about some of the integration updates that we made?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So the brand new update, just in terms of our first-party remote provider support, is SonarQube. Those of you who have been with us for a decade, as some of you on this call may have been, know that we had an early integration with SonarQube in our open source product where it would pull ThreadFix data into it. We have now added a remote provider into ThreadFix that will pull SonarQube security and vulnerability related data into ThreadFix. So this was kind of brought on by SonarQube expanding their native capability set to include vulnerabilities, application vulnerability scanning. So that's now something as a first-party integration within ThreadFix through the remote provider features. Additionally, Veracode, which has long been a valued partner of ours and an integration that we've had within ThreadFix, has added a new set of capabilities in their product and their platform for software composition analysis. through their SourceClear acquisition. And so now we've expanded our Veracode integration. The same Veracode integration that we've had in the past now also will pull SCA data that they're presenting. And there's a couple of additional features I want to show you guys a little bit later when we get into filtering conversation, or actually just next, where you can find ways of looking at that data, even though it came from a single source, separately from the static analysis results you have always been looking at from Veracode or the dynamic results. And then finally, Black Duck, we've made an extension to that integration to also be able to pull in additional details around the SCA data that it already provides. So as you are identifying vulnerabilities in specific dependencies or specific libraries, Black Duck can provide information on, if you just upgrade to this version of that dependency, this vulnerability will no longer be present. If you update to this version of the dependency, no known vulnerabilities will be present. That information is now also able to come into ThreadFix. So few updates to existing integrations, and of course SonarQube now as a remote provider in ThreadFix as well. For the next slide, I think as a opportunity to do a quick showcase of some of the new filtering capabilities in ThreadFix. As I mentioned before, you now have the ability beyond just filtering on the scanner source, because increasingly we're seeing individual scanner sources are starting to provide different types of data. You know, in the past you had a dynamic analysis tool from from WebInspect, or in the form of WebInspect. That's the only thing it was providing as dynamic results. Same thing, you know, checkmarks is the only thing it's providing as static results. We're starting to see that more and more as you're using, like in the case of Microfocus, and SSC integration, where you could have your dynamic results, your static results right next to each other, or now with Veracode, you could have your static results and your SCA results right next to each other. It helps to be able to filter that down and separate those, even though they came from a single source. So we've added that capability. Additionally, pivoting has been added to enable the dependencies to be grouped by those actual libraries. So this kind of seems like a no-brainer once you look at it, but it is an incredibly powerful addition to our filtering capabilities to say, I've got this laundry list of defects across all of my applications, but I want to know where all of the defects for this particular dependency exist. If I'm using Struts 2.1, where all am I using Struts 2.1 now that I've pulled in all of this data across my portfolio? And then finally, being able to trace individual findings to microservices. So this one's going to be easier to show than to talk about. Why don't I just share my, my demo box real quick, and I can kind of walk through these for you guys. Terrific. Hopefully this is up. Dan, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing my dashboard? All right, great. Same old dashboard in 2.8. Now you may notice that the menu system is very different. This is to mimic the UI and navigation of 3.0. We've brought that back into the 2 platform to provide a little bit of consistency as folks move from one to the next. There's a lot of additional things in 3, and we didn't want to put too many changes in place when you moved eventually from your 2 deployment to your 3 deployment, as that makes sense for your organization. So that might be the first thing that's obvious here. But to talk a little bit about the filtering, let me go to my analytics section really quickly. And I'm going to pull up the vulnerability search tree. So for all the vulnerabilities currently in the system, and show a couple of the new capabilities that we added. So first, if we want to look at a vulnerability by the analysis type, we can look for just, for example, dependency vulnerabilities, as opposed to seeing everything from every scanner, and apply that. And that's going to reduce this list just to the dependency vulnerabilities. But additionally, as we talked earlier about the pivots, I can change my pivot type to be based on dependency as well. And so these can be grouped, instead of by CWE, by the actual vulnerable component. And so now I can see, oh, I'm using Struts 2 Core in 12 different places, or I have 12 different vulnerabilities that may exist across different applications. And so I can quickly peruse this list and identify who is using this particular component that has known vulnerabilities, and what are all the vulnerabilities that roll up under that particular vulnerable component. You can see there are different CVEs that we've tracked here, but instead of reporting them independently, we can group them by the component itself. So those are a couple of the different filtering capabilities that we added. To get to the what I was discussing with the microservice capabilities, I'm going to use this checkmarks connection that I've got in my instance as an example. I have a series of test projects in checkmarks that I've mapped to ThreadFix applications. Anyone familiar with our remote provider feature set knows what we do here. But we've had for a while the ability to map multiple source applications to a single ThreadFix application. And the typical use case for this is when you're tracking microservices in your scanning program, but you don't need to, or you don't care to track microservices in your ThreadFix management. That granularity of information is not really relevant to your security program. You need to know what the parent application vulnerability trends are and what's currently open for them. We allow you to do that. However, if you ever needed to figure out where an individual finding came from, when it's time to trace it back and assign it potentially to the responsible development team, that was something that we did not allow for you to do in ThreadFix if you used this microservice bundling behaviors. Now, within ThreadFix, you can go to the specific finding or the specific vulnerability, and we'll be tracking back in the individual findings which microservice application it came from. So you'll be able to get that traceability when you need it for assigning vulnerability remediation tasks, or by opening JIRA tickets for the appropriate development team. That's an additional feature that we've added into 2.8. So that's a quick high level on that. I'm going to go ahead and let Dan get the ownership back. And Dan, you're muted still.
All right, so digging in again to kind of two of the bigger capabilities that we've added. I was looking at the time to remediate policies, and this is in fitting with our, when I talked about the kind of the main goals of ThreadFix. This is when you talk about prioritizing with data. This helps you to find out when serious vulnerabilities have been exposed for too long, and to tailor those policies to your organization and different compliance or other requirements that you have in your organization. And this is allows for very specific controls to be placed on your vulnerability lifecycle, and the implementation of it is intended to be very lightweight. ThreadFix for as long as I can remember has had the capability to create custom filters and policies around those, and those allow for a tremendous amount of configurability. And incorporating different factors about the vulnerability, and to determine if something is inside of is within a policy or is with not. And what we found was that in certain ways we were offering, and continue to offer, a lot of capability there, but not necessarily enough granularity around time. But also setting those up could be a little more involved than they needed to be in certain cases. And to put another tool in the toolbox, we've added this capability. And again, the intention is to be very lightweight and easy to set up. And so I'll turn this over to Kyle here to go through and demonstrate this capability.
Terrific, thank you. All right, so we're back here on the dashboard. First place we'd want to take a look at for managing this new policy type, of course, is under the policies menu. So if you go to customize and the new navigation, policies is right here. You may notice there's a little bit of a different layout with the policies. We've broken this apart to be a bit more straightforward from an administrative perspective, but there is a new tab here called time to remediate. The time to remediate policies allow you to create as many as you care to create policies with different restrictions on it in terms of how long vulnerabilities can exist as known vulns at a certain severity level. So I'm going to go ahead and create a sample policy here, and let's say we'll call this internal applications, which I may not have as strict a requirement on as far as the policy itself is concerned. So I may be willing to allow critical vulnerabilities to exist for 60 days for internal applications, and maybe 180 days for highs, and I may never care about the mediums or the lows. So I'm gonna go ahead and create that as a new policy. You can see now it shows up alongside these other policies. I have public-facing application policies, which is far more strict. I have a global policy, which I think any application, it doesn't matter what it's doing, it needs at least some base level of requirement. So I'm going to create a global policy that dictates that. And then for each of these policies, you can define the scope that they are applied at. So the global policy, I just have one application for, which is maybe a bit of a misnomer. So perhaps I'd want to add all of the teams in my organization to this global policy so that they are all susceptible to the policy. I can do that. If I then want to take a specific single application and give it a more stringent set of requirements, I can look at my public-facing applications restriction, add on a specific application that I think needs to be a little bit more aggressively monitored, And while it is technically susceptible to the global and the public-facing applications policy, because the public application policy restrictions are greater, then it's going to be held to account for those requirements. And if we look at the public restriction ones here, we can see that I've got 10 days on criticals, 30 days on high, and 180 days on medium. So it is a much more aggressive policy for remediation. Once we've got that assigned to any application, you can go and look within the application and see exactly how bad off you are or how good you are on a per vulnerability basis. So as Dan mentioned, this is intended to be very lightweight. We just provide a little bit of detail in the UI. My demo data is very old, so you can see we are quite out of date with our policy here. I have a 234-day past due critical cross-site scripting here, and a 1,662-day past due critical cross-site scripting just below it. But
you should get on that dev team and tell them to get working.
They are clearly slow on the policy adherence. But the other thing that we do as you start approaching the overdue date for a vulnerability, when you're within 7 days of that date, you'll start seeing warnings on given vulns that indicate that you are not yet in breach, but it's on the cusp. Any of these policies that you configure, each one can have its own recipient email list or a distribution list, and these warnings and these alerts of breach can be sent out for any given policy to that distribution list. So each day they will get an update, if there is an update to provide, on these applications have these vulnerabilities that are within 7 days of falling out of compliance. So that would be their warning alert. And then there would be an actual breach alert that can go out for any applications and their vulnerabilities that have gone in excess of the policy that you've dictated. So again, very lightweight initially. We want to make sure that it's something that's easy for folks to get in and start getting some value from. In the next release of ThreadFix 2.8.1, we'll be adding a couple of additional kind of user beneficiary features on letting people put snoozes on particular vulnerabilities. If you've identified that this thing, yeah, it's past due, but we understand the reason we haven't fixed this is because there needs to be an update to an underlying dependency on that server, and we can't do that this month. Like we've been granted an exception. So I want to go in and snooze this for 30 days because the normal policy is not going to apply for this particular vulnerability based on that exception. Or you can completely take vulnerabilities off the list of things that are assessed. This is something, we have a mitigating control in place. I don't want to lose track that this vulnerability is here, but I don't want to get alerted on it. And so I just want to snooze that indefinitely. Those are some additional capabilities that you'll get in the very next release of ThreadFix on top of the time to remediate feature itself. So with that, I'll hand it back to Dan. And I believe you're muted again.
All right. Yep. There we go. Just getting my share back up. There we go. There we go. And so in support of our centralized view mission, again, with ThreadFix, we want to pull in the results of all the different assurance activities that you're undertaking. And we've supported this type of capability for a while in ThreadFix, but not as natively as we could have. You've been able to enter manual vulnerabilities. We have our .threadfix file for bulk upload of vulnerabilities. But candidly, like, the user experience wasn't great for pen test teams. It didn't work the way that they wanted or they needed it to work to really make it efficient for them. And so in spending time with some users, we figured out more about like what that workflow needed to look like and how can we provide a better experience. And so again, ThreadFix has always been focused on how can we stop communicating in scanner PDFs, and we've always from the beginning, I think, had a good user experience for not communicating or getting rid of the need to communicate with PDFs that come out of scanners, instead treating that data in a structured manner. But we were still seeing far too many PDFs being tossed around as the deliverable from pen test teams. So now we've focused on this as a first-rate way to get data into ThreadFix to live alongside the data from the automated scanners and to allow the pen test teams an easier set of tools they can use to manage that data and its life cycle over time. Just as an aside, again, talking about ways to bulk load data into ThreadFix, we have our .threadfix file format. It's a JSON-based format, allows for easy import of vulnerability sources into ThreadFix, where ThreadFix might not have a native connector. There's a number of vendors in the space out there that are exporting ThreadFix files, and again, it's an open spec that's out there for people to have access to. And it was interesting. This came out of a discussion, a couple discussions that we had with both analysts and journalists, and all they wanted to talk about was shifting left, shift left, shift left, shift left. And that's great. We think shifting left is fantastic, but I think it's also important to understand. And I think people running application security and vulnerability management programs understand this. I don't know if the analysts have as enlightened a view, or if journalists understand this as well. But we had a lot of discussions, and they're wanted to know about shift left, but not all tasks are going to shift left. And we really see the leading organizations thinking in a coverage model. What vulnerabilities and design issues am I addressing, and at what point in the development lifecycle? And there are certain things that can be done in CI/CD integration, and we've had this capability in ThreadFix, and we've refined it over time. And, it's been in ThreadFix for a number of years, orchestrating scanners and potentially making decisions. Certain tasks you can do inside of a CI/CD build, others have to be kicked off and evaluated later, and that's all really great. But again, what we found is any organization that has a program complicated enough or sophisticated enough where ThreadFix helped them out, served a need. They also had at least, they had typically a very large penetration testing program, and oftentimes would have multiple penetration testing teams. I know there's one of the large banking and financial customers that we work for. They have 5 separate penetration testing or red teams that have relevance to ThreadFix. They all have different responsibilities, different areas of coverage or levels of coverage, but due to the overlapping governance and compliance requirements that this organization has, they've got a number of different teams with different missions and supported different goals. And what we want to do is support organizations that have up to that level of complexity in their programs. Again, we want all of this data centralized, and we want to provide the tools to make these testers and these analysts more efficient so they can get more done and focus on the highest value activities. And at that, I'll turn over to Kyle to talk through and talk through this. Here you go, Kyle.
Thank you. All right, I think this is the last demo component, but I wanted to show you guys what we put in place for this feature. So first off, if we go to the administration section, we need to set up, as we're using this, we need to set up penetration testing teams. The internal use case that we anticipate most of our clients will benefit from, and in fact, I think at least half of you on this webinar, I've had direct phone conversations and screen shares to discuss what this feature needs to be and how it needs to work for you. But one of the first things you'll want to do is be able to set up a penetration testing team. So you'll notice one of the things we've changed, we've lumped all of the access controls and user management into identity management, and also added the pen test team management within that. So in ThreadFix, you can create a number of pen testing teams that match what your needs are, and assign users or groups of users to those teams as being capable pen testers representing that organization within your organization. So the pen test team access is granted to the users that need to be performing it. And then based on the access that those users have to various applications in your system, they can choose to go and then perform a penetration test. This application budget, I've had 2 assessments that I've already had performed against it as using this feature from the Denim Group pen test team. So if I wanted to go back in and say, okay, I'm now, it's a month later, I want to do another penetration test as that team member, because I've been granted access to 3 different teams, I need to select who I'm here representing. But once I've done that, I can start a new penetration test. And the first thing that this does is look to see if there's anything else in the past for this application my penetration testing team has delivered. In this case, there is. I've delivered 3 different findings in a previous pen test that are showing me here, hey, last time you did an assessment, these were open, What do you want to do with them now? And so as part of a retesting effort, we make it very easy to look at the details of what a particular vulnerability finding had reported from the previous test, and then identify this has been remediated, so we no longer need to worry about it. This has not been remediated, so we still need to worry about it, and so is this, and maybe add a new finding. When it comes time to adding findings for a pen test team, you have the option of creating dynamic specific details, static specific details, or both if you're doing kind of a white box and black box assessment of your application, or to report dependency sourced findings as if you're identifying a problem with a known vulnerable component. But anyways, you put these pieces of information together, you can upload files to go with the findings. So if you have a screenshot that supports what you're presenting, all of that can get submitted along with the other findings on that pen test. And I can leave and come back. Maybe I work on it for a couple hours today. I log out, I go do other stuff for the rest of my day, and I come back tomorrow and keep working on it. All of this progress is saved. And indeed, anybody who's part of this pen test team can contribute to this assessment. So if you have 3 or 4 assessment analysts that are working at the same time, they can all collaborate on the same data as they're working maybe on different parts of the application. But ultimately, once the assessment has been completed, I can choose to submit the pen test. I'm getting a warning here letting me know that once I do this, this actually will become part of the history of the application. Before it's submitted, while it's being worked on, the application itself, its vulnerability list doesn't change. You don't see these under development findings from an active pen test until it is submitted. Once that point happens, however, I can pick when I want that submission to be presented by. So I would say, I want to say this pen test has been performed on May 5th, and then I can submit this, and it essentially becomes a new scan. From a ThreadFix perspective, it's just a new scan that gets uploaded to that application, and that application processes it like any other, which means that merging, deduplication, all of that same stuff that we would do if it came from a specific scanner would be done by a pen test submission. So that's kind of at a high level how we see folks using the pen test feature. Again, we've got some interesting features that we want to add onto this in the coming months as well. One of our early consumers of this feature actually will be our own Denim Group application security assessment team. They're already putting this to good use and providing great feedback on where we can go with it in the future as well. But we felt this was a very exciting way to help facilitate internal interactions within a AppSec program for our customers. One other thing to note on this, just so that folks are aware this is a possibility, once you've defined that pen test team in ThreadFix, you can always seed that data. If you wanted to get the first, like I've been using a pen test program in my organization for years. And so this application's already been assessed by my pen test team, and I've already got the results of that assessment from 3 months ago. I would love for them to use ThreadFix moving forward, but I don't want them to have to enter in all the stuff that they've already reported and we haven't fixed yet. Well, the good news is that we can upload their most recent assessment using the ThreadFix file format, and that will pre-populate all of the findings that they had reported most recently, and you can even date that appropriately so that it would appear to come from that assessment team, but without them having to go and manually enter all those items in. The very next time they want to go and perform an assessment through the UI at that point, then it will pull up all of the findings in the view that I showed you a minute ago and identify these things need to be marked as remediated or not remediated, and you can now add new findings within ThreadFix. So getting that data started for any existing pen test program that you may have had before we happened to introduce this feature is also something we wanted to make sure we could facilitate, and is relatively easily done by mapping that most recent result set to the ThreadFix format. So with that, I'll pass it back to Dan.
Thanks, Kyle. And that's really the majority of what we wanted to talk through today about the latest capabilities for managing pen test teams and managing time to live, as well as some other updates to the ThreadFix platform. Now I'd like to open it up to questions. If people have any open questions in the Q&A, I see there's one in the chat. Yeah, and so
if you want, I can do a quick screen share to show the answer to that question. In that specific question, I've already got the data up. So the question that was asked was, is it possible to filter bugs by a pen test so that you can see all the bugs that have been that were reported by that pen test? So Dan, if you stop sharing real quick, I can show how to do that. As I
Sorry.
mentioned before, any pen test that you submit is one that that is treated basically like a scan. And so we extend that to say any pen test team that's in your organization, we treat it like a scanner. So anything that was submitted by a pen test, you can always scan for it by scanning, or sorry, you can always filter for it by filtering for that pen test team. And so I believe I created the Denim Group pen test team, so I can filter on all of the findings that came from that pen test team and see them here. So the answer to the question is yes, you can see everything that came from a particular team for a particular application. Or if I ran this exact same filter globally, I could see anything that that pen test team had reported for any application from the analytics section. Additionally, if you went to the assessments tab, you didn't care what they've reported over time or what's currently open. You want to know what a specific assessment reported. Again, because we treat these assessments like scans, in the back end, you can look and say, like, I want to know what 3 things were reported by this assessment, which wasn't the most recent. And then you can go view assessment to do that and look up specifically what the independent findings were that were reported by that assessment team. So if I want to know what this medium finding for CWE 89 that team reported in that, I can go look at the detail page for that from that assessment object. So in both cases, you can get the details that you're looking for from what a pen test team performed and what information they provided with that assessment.
Yeah, I really like the ability to track that history and that context. Again, as people come on the team, off the team, maybe move between teams and things like that. That's been I think it's been well received by folks where they a lot of times a lot of that information gets kept in notepads or shared directories or other stuff like that. So we think that's helpful from a time management standpoint. Question about, can you store both, can the pen test allow for both dynamic and static results? And so yes, you can, we call it the capability penetration testing, but it supports all your manual assessment efforts, which can include, code review, as well as, I believe, dependencies. Is that correct, Kyle?
Yeah, code review, dependencies, and black box testing. And the additional capability is if you want to put code review and black box testing detail, like if you have the equivalent of a dynamic assessment result set where let's say you used ZAP to assist your penetration test. And so you've got like request response information that you want to make part of that vulnerability, but you are also looking at the source code. So you've got details about what line number, what file actually has the source of this vuln. You can put all of that into a single finding within ThreadFix pen test. And when you submit that, that finding will have both pieces of data to enrich the details of the vulnerability. And further, when you do the filtering that we talked about, where you can filter on static versus dynamic, it will pick up for a pen test those findings that had static details that were provided, or those findings that had dynamic details that were provided, so that you can filter down on that as well. So all of that's possible through the new feature.
Let's see, there's a question about alerting. Let's see, I think, can time to remediate and alerting of the due date be assigned to pen test finding? And then after the due date, is it possible to escalate to the issue owner's manager?
So, I'm sorry, Dan, I keep answering these before you do, but I'm happy to if that's okay. I don't mean to interrupt.
Go for it.
I get excited because I've got ways to do all these things. Yes, thank you. Great question. The alerting of due date is related to the pen test, just like anything else. So the pen test finding date is based on when the pen test was submitted. That's how we treat this is when this vuln was known. And so the clock will start from when the pen test submission date was created, or like when you actually submit the pen test, the date you select as its submission date. So for that question, yes, it is always evaluated alongside the scan results. Can it be elevated to the manager if it's gone after the due date? Then yes, for that particular policy, you would want to make sure that that manager is a recipient of the alert email that gets sent out when you have that configured, because the alerting process that we have through ThreadFix today is through that email distribution when you have applications that are out of compliance or nearing being out of compliance with a time to remediate policy. So in both cases, we can handle that. And actually, I can keep going down the line. Is there integration?
Go for it. You're on a roll.
Yeah. There's a question if there's integration with Burp Pro. What does that look and feel like? we do not have an API-driven integration with Burp Suite, which is to say we don't have a remote provider for Burp Suite. However, the output from Burp Suite has long been a supported file type that we can parse and ingest. So yes, the Burp Suite Pro XML export, I believe, is structurally identical to the Burp Client XML export,
Yeah.
which means that in both cases we can ingest.
And I actually might just jump in, and I'm not deeply recently familiar with the Burp Suite naming, but I think Burp Pro is the desktop-based, but with the automated dash scanning, and Burp Enterprise is the server-based version. And so I would just say, like, yes, you can export files from Burp Pro, and I believe you can also download files from Burp Enterprise, but we don't yet have a API-based integration with Burp Enterprise. But for Burp Pro, you can export those files and load those into ThreadFix.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you. The next question was about the ThreadFix file itself. They said basically there's no way to upload bulk manual findings into ThreadFix without having to build the ThreadFix file, which is true. The bulk upload of findings into ThreadFix is the reason we defined the ThreadFix file spec was to allow teams to be able to get that into ThreadFix easily. But there's a request for a tool that we can automate the creation of ThreadFix files, and we actually have already developed one. It's not a formal feature in the product. It's a separate tool, I believe written in Python by our very own SE manager. But he has now a tool that he's developed, and we are getting polished so that we can release it to the broader public, essentially a CSV conversion utility. So if your source data is in Excel or in any comma separated format that is consistent enough where we just say, okay, we've detected these columns, please tell us what these columns mean in terms of these object values that we need for the ThreadFix file, then his tool now goes through and will generate a ThreadFix file for you. So if you have some interest in using that as it's currently in beta form, please let us know. We'd be happy to work with you and get your feedback on it. It will ultimately be shipped with the product as we finalize kind of some next round of early user feedback on that tool. But the intent for that is to basically fully replace what we've done in the past with SSVL. So there's really no excuse left to continue using SSVL, as the ThreadFix file format gives you way more flexibility and a lot more opportunity to provide details and recommendations and, et cetera, around your findings. Essentially, the ThreadFix file's goal is to allow you to provide all of the detail on any given finding that any scanner could provide to ThreadFix. And so we're looking for feature parity in terms of information that can be provided to ThreadFix through that. And of course, having a utility to generate that from something as ubiquitous as CSV files certainly makes a lot of sense. Next question was, are there APIs available for these new features already? Yes, there are APIs available for creating certain details that you've seen in this presentation. There's some additional API expansions that we're putting into 2.8.1 to include the ability to do things like query on time to remediate values that are remaining. But the majority of what we've seen is already in the API, and then there's a few features that are going to be adding into 2.8.1 to get behind it. So again, our goal is to always be in feature parity. This one may be out of step for a couple of the new capabilities until 2.8.1, but most of this is encapsulated in the API. Then the next question is, ThreadFix currently allows the use of deprecated CWE IDs, for example, from the OWASP Top 10 of 2013. Do we plan to remove this? We don't have any plans right now to remove historic CWE values because we have a lot of customers that have historic scan data in ThreadFix. So those values are probably going to persist. However, the information that they provide in terms of the reporting, for instance, the CWE top 10 list, we have continued to update that reporting to show the current OWASP top 10 as they roll out new lists. So we plan to support essentially both. Because of legacy data in our system, we need to make sure that we don't remove the support for that, but as new data comes in, we're going to be updating. And in fact, 2.8 added the latest updates to the CWE spec that came out just, I think, a couple months ago, maybe 1 month ago. And I think I'm out of questions in the chat. I'm not sure about the Q&A room. Dan, are you tracking any there?
Q&A, yeah, tracking the Q&A. It's all been through the chat. So I think any additional questions from anybody? One thing I do want to mention, and I meant to mention this up front, and it slipped my mind, but when Kyle and I were talking about what was going into this release, I was not a fan of the pen test feature because I wanted more shift left. And as it turns out, Kyle, given the response that we've had from current ThreadFix users as well as a number of the prospects that we've talked to, we were certainly better served by prioritizing, at least at the current time, a lot of the pen test stuff that Kyle and his team put into this. And so I want to give credit to Kyle for beating me up and pushing this through, because again, the initial response we've had has been really good, and also, as I said, I think for the organizations running programs that are sophisticated enough to benefit from ThreadFix, penetration testing, like it or not, is and will continue to be a really important part of that program. And again, it's always great to be able to give our users the tools they need to better run their programs. So.
Terrific. Well, yeah, thank you, Dan. And thank you. I mean, again, it really was not being flippant. The number of attendees we have on this call is fantastic. And I'm pretty sure I've spoken with at least half of them in person about a number of the upcoming capabilities and the capabilities that we launched in 2.8. So I'd also like to give credit to all those conversations that the folks that I've worked with have helped show me what the importance of that feature and the others that we've done are, and how they may best utilize it in their program. So yeah, thank you for all your participation, the folks that have been longtime ThreadFix users and some folks that are currently evaluating the product to figure out how they fits in their future program. They've also provided lots of great feedback. So terrific.
Well, excellent. Unless there are any other questions, again, want to thank everybody for taking some time to tune in today. Want to thank everybody who had questions. Really appreciated the participation. Again, we continue to be in a kind of strange times, and I'm thankful that in the industry that we're in, that we can work remotely and continue to keep the wheels turning. Not everyone is that fortunate, so I'm thankful for that. And again, thanks to everybody for coming out today. Hope you all and your families stay safe and healthy, and looking forward to talking to people soon.
Thank you all.